They can't stay for 8 hours, 24 hours without sex, and we end up calling them womanizers, we end up calling them prostitutes, and we think that it's something that they choose to do, but it all has to do with that initial encounter. Hi awesome people, Joyful here and welcome back to the Family Being Me YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about what happens to a person's relationship life, sex life, and the general life as an adult if they don't get to heal from sexual assault. If you're new here, please feel welcome. Just to repeat, this is a very sensitive video, and if you've watched the other two videos about sexual assault that I made, you probably already know this disclaimer, but allow me to repeat it for the ones who are new. If you feel like talking about masturbation, sex, promiscuity, or sexual assault is 1. a taboo, 2. something that Christians like me shouldn't be talking about, 3. something that people my age shouldn't be talking about, or 4. something that I totally shouldn't open my mouth to even speak about, then I'm sorry, but this video is not for you. And this is just to humbly save you the agony of having to listen to me speak about things that you don't agree with. But you're welcome to watch all my other videos, especially the peaceful ones. At the end of this video, we're going to do a small exercise, and whether you have been sexually assaulted or not, it's gonna shed some light and help you understand why your relationship life is the way it is right now as an adult, and also why your sex life is the way that it is right now as an adult if you are indulging in it. So in this video, we're going to go through 3 categories in which somebody may fall if they don't ever get to heal from the trauma of sexual assaults. And you'll realize that the things that I'm about to mention are not as a result of just only sexual assault, but can be a result of any form of abuse, be it physical, mental, emotional, or all of those types of abuse. The first category is of those who are controlling. This is where you can find people being perfectionists, and for this type of people, everything has to go the way they want. They don't understand that there are various ways or various methods that things can be done. If they want things to be done their way, it has to be their way, or else they can get very, very cross with you or very, very mad at you for not doing things the way they wanted them to be. Another trait is where somebody is very emotionally controlling. These are the type of people you find criticizing other people in order to just intimidate them. For example, if you have an emotionally controlling girlfriend, they can make you feel guilty in order for you to do exactly what they want you to do for them. And they will stop at nothing to continue harming your emotions just in order to eventually get control. Another trait of control is in dating aggression. If you're in a relationship with somebody who has dating aggression, you will always feel like you're afraid of doing anything because it's as though anything you do will make them upset about you. They're always paranoid, always accusing you for cheating on them. They're not mature enough to understand what personal space means in a relationship. They can follow you every time you're going out to do anything. They always want to know who you're texting and all that kind of stuff. The second set of people are those who continue to show vulnerability after sexual assault. Facing rough times is a normal thing in life, but if you're in a relationship with somebody who is prone to self-harm, these are the people you can find hitting their heads on the wall after an argument in a relationship. They can roll themselves on the floor, over the stairs, just in order to harm themselves. Or sometimes they just harm themselves in silence. They can cut their wrists with razor blades and all that kind of stuff because they continue to see themselves as vulnerable people. So when they face any form of tension, any form of danger, anything that's called an obstacle, they will end up harming themselves. Another trait of vulnerability is dissociation. If you know me from my childhood or my high school life, this was totally me. Very isolated from the environment, never really immersed into the real world, and most definitely a very, very forgetful person. But hey, thank God for healing because that's not who I am anymore. Another trait is when somebody gets emotionally unresponsive. This is where you find people who don't like to be in relationships because they really don't want any form of attachment. Even in friendship, it's very hard for these people to express their emotions or the way they feel to other people. And in general, it's just difficult for them to have personal relationships with other people. Another thing under vulnerability is sexual dysfunction. Now, just to bring to your attention, it's very possible for somebody to forget the fact that they were ever sexually abused, especially if the abuse happened when they were kids. There are people who realize that they were abused in their 20s, some in their 30s, some in their their lives having problems and they never know what causes these problems when it comes to sexual dysfunction. Because sex was introduced as a wrong way, then as an adult somebody is more likely to view sex as a form of danger instead of as a form of pleasure, and that can result to sexual difficulties whether you're a man or a lady. Another show of vulnerability is when somebody finds it hard to trust other people. They're always just paranoid. And another thing is when people end up fantasizing a lot. You can find somebody is always staring in the air, building their own castles in the air. They're never really present, and even if you talk to them, they keep looking at you with blank eyes as though they never heard what you really said. The last example of a show of vulnerability is when people focus only on the positive, and this can be dangerous because when somebody or something is harming them, then they still choose to look on the positive side, and they can end up being in continuous abuse just because they choose to see the positives and not the negatives. The third and last category of people are those who continue with the abuse. This is where you find people who seem to always be in the wrong types of relationships. They always have a girlfriend or a boyfriend who is physically abusing them, emotionally abusing them, or psychologically abusing them. And the thing is that if they never get to heal from their traumatic experience of sexual assault, even if they break up with their current boyfriend or their current girlfriend who is abusing them, they will still end up in an abusive relationship. The only difference is that the next relationship will be with somebody who has a different name. So it's really important for somebody to heal in order for them to disconnect the trend of abuse. And for these people, it's not that it's their choice to be in abusive relationships. It's just that love and intimacy was portrayed to them in form of abuse. So their brains just tend to get attracted to people who abuse them in any kind of way. So if you see somebody who has a high IQ or a very intelligent person in general and you still find them in abusive relationships, chances are that they have gone through a history of abuse. But if somebody can help them point out the history of how they were once abused, then it gets easier for them to understand why they even end up in abusive relationships. Another form of continuation is when somebody continues to be the perpetrator, and although chances are very minimal for victims of sexual assault to end up being perpetrators, some of them do actually end up being perpetrators themselves. Another way is when somebody can easily give in to pressure. People always keep saying that my friends knew at me and I ended up giving in to peer pressure, and that's the reason why I do drugs, that's the reason why I do alcohol. But people need to realize that they are not the first people who have gone through peer pressure, and they're definitely not the only people who have gone through peer pressure. So they should ask themselves, why are they the ones who ended up giving in to peer pressure? And that's where you find that if you have a history of abuse, then you're more likely to give in to pressure or any form of tension. And so that goes henceforth to the abuse of drugs and the abuse of alcohol, or really any other kind of substance. Another way that people continue the abuse is when they end up being addicted to what happened to them. If there was a burst of dopamine during sexual assault, then somebody will always be looking for that burst continuously. This is where we end up calling women prostitutes and we end up calling men womanizers, just because they can't stay for 8 hours, 24 hours without having sex. They end up being addicted to sex, and it's not out of choice, but it's because from the time of sexual assault, they keep looking for that next burst of dopamine, and the only way they know how to find it is through intercourse. And that is how a person becomes promiscuous if they don't get to heal from sexual assault. The last example of how somebody can continue the trend of sexual assault is the addiction to masturbation. For example, in cases where the perpetrator forced the victim to perform acts of masturbation, then definitely the victim might end up being addicted to masturbation, and this can result to addiction to pornography, and they really are hand in hand connected to sexual addiction. So finally, as promised, we're gonna go through that activity that I mentioned in the start of the video. Wherever you're watching me from, try to relax, close your eyes if you must. Just try to remember the very first time that you encountered the word sex, intimacy, or love. Just try to go back, way back to your teenhood, to your childhood. When was that very first time, the very initial time that you encountered the word sex, intimacy, time? Was it something that was violent? I don't want to be the judge to tell you which perception is right and which perception is wrong. You be the judge and decide whether your first encounter with sex was a distorted one or whether it was a healthy one. I personally know that mine was a very distorted one because by now we all know what happened to me as a kid. So had I not taken the steps to heal, then that would have definitely affected the rest of my life. So if your first encounter was a healthy one, I hope that it continues to be that way as you grow older for the rest of your life. And if it was a distorted one, I hope that you may get to rewire your brain and you may get to heal from whatever form of distortion that was, and that eventually you may get to enjoy love and relationships in a very healthy way and in a way that will always satisfy you and will always fulfill you to the extent that you will never be left empty, always looking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I'd just like to quickly mention 3 last things that affect victims of sexual assault, and these are triggers and feeling bitter and hate towards other people. Triggers are normal. Anything can be a trigger. Even simple words like sit down can be a trigger. You can find somebody going to a job interview and if they're told to kindly sit down, they just pass out because the word sit down was used in the wrong way initially when they were victims of sexual assault. So it's really important that if you have ever been assaulted, try and identify your triggers, know what they are and know what causes them or what caused them. Try to figure a way in which you can train your mind to just think of these triggers in a totally different way. Hatred and bitterness can also be another general thing that victims of sexual assault can experience. Somebody can end up hating the gender of the person who was their perpetrator, or they can hate their own gender for the fact that they were just so helpless and they couldn't do anything during the time of assault. Somebody can end up being a tomboy because they hate themselves for being a lady, or this can bring up negative feminism or a toxic form of male chauvinism. One last thing is where people have very disturbing thoughts about sex, not because you want to think of it that way, but because it's something that was wired into your brain. I just want to put this out there. If you still haven't healed from your trauma, let nobody ever tell you that trauma is irreversible. I have experienced firsthand how God has healed me from my past trauma to this point where I am able to talk about what happened to me, because I understand that there is a point where you can't even verbalize what happens to you. Healing from your past trauma is a very possible thing, and it doesn't matter how long it was. Even if you're in your 50s right now and you're watching this, I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to heal from your trauma. And I'm gonna link down some guides that I believe can help you through your trauma if you were once a victim. So all in all, I hope that you just take the steps towards healing. Never rush your healing process. Everybody's healing process is unique and you can't heal in a snap. Healing is never forced, so just take your time. It might be a year, it might be 2 years. It's just something that happens in layers, page by page. It's about the progress. And one day you will look back and you will realize how far you have come, and you will be so glad that you took those first initial steps, which I usually normally had, towards healing. So that's it all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I know it wasn't any easy for you to digest whatever I have said in the past 3 videos, this included, but in the same way, it also wasn't easy for me. I spent months just practicing in order to get used to hearing myself even speak these words. So I'd appreciate it if you left a comment down below. Please subscribe to my channel, but most importantly, share this video with somebody. Somebody needs to hear this today. Share it on your social media pages, and also follow me on Instagram for updates on the next video and what it's gonna be about. Shalom and peace be with you.